Spree killers. They unleash their deadly rage on unsuspecting victims.
I think carnage is the simple way to describe it.
Targeting the public in seemingly random acts of violence.
Starkweather got out of the car and walked up and shot Meyer immediately. He then dragged Meyer into the wash house and covered him with a blanket.
What drives these killers? And who is most evil? A scale exists to measure the darkest corners of human behavior. From impulse killings to madness-fueled violence. Calculated acts of cruelty, torture, and brutality. Forensics now reveals those among us who are most evil. Spree killers. They strike when least expected. Their acts of violence are often motivated by vengeance, loneliness, and insecurity. Charles Starkweather falls in love. He kills 10 people to keep from losing his girlfriend. Martin Bryant is teased and taunted throughout his entire life. He seeks revenge in a cafe with 2 automatic rifles. Charles Whitman spends years fighting violent urges. Finally, he snaps, gunning down 14 victims from a clock tower. But what distinguishes one spree killer from the next? Now there is a scale with 22 levels that measures the different degrees of evil. It weighs a killer's motive, method, and malice. The more heinous the crime, the higher the criminal is placed on the scale. Creator of this scale, Dr. Michael Stone, forensic psychiatrist, Columbia University.
When a spree killer lashes out, he will kill anyone in his path. His victims are largely tragic examples of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
As Dr. Stone examines these cases, several key characteristics of spree killers emerge. To better understand their criminal minds, he investigates spree killers, starting with Martin Bryant. April 28, 1996. Tasmania, Australia. Sunday lunch at a popular tourist cafe. Within minutes, 28-year-old Martin Bryant will open fire with 2 semi-automatic rifles. His plan? To kill everyone in sight. Bryant is on a killing spree. This cafe is his second stop. By day's end, he leaves a body count of 35 dead, 19 wounded.
I think carnage is the simple way to describe it.
Close studies of the backgrounds of rampage killers like Martin Bryant reveal that many have endured parental brutality and have had, in general, a deeply troubled childhood. The result may be an extreme level of cumulative frustration, leading to violence as the former victim now victimizes others.
As a child, Martin Bryant is oddly detached and emotionless. His strange antisocial behavior makes others uncomfortable. An IQ test reveals a score of 79, mild mental retardation. Bryant is relentlessly bullied by other children, who at one point nearly drowned him in a lake. Traumatized, Bryant begins lashing out. He throws rocks at other children. He tortures animals.
There was a strong connection between animal torture in childhood and later violence against human beings. It is a sign often suggestive of psychopathic behavior, a cold indifference to the suffering of other living beings.
Bryant's parents express concern for their son. He is diagnosed with schizophrenia. Treatment has little effect. He begins to play with fire. At age 10, he tries to ignite himself with a match. 2 years later, he is burned badly while playing with fireworks. In the hospital, he speaks to news reporters about the incident.
Do you think you'll be playing with firecrackers anymore?
Yes.
Don't you think you've learned a lesson from this?
Yes, but I'm still playing with it.
Bryant takes a gardening job for an older woman. She invites him to move in, and they become close friends. In 1992, she is killed in a car crash. Bryant is devastated by the loss. The next year, his father commits suicide. Bryant feels abandoned. He lives alone for the first time in his life. The solitude is unbearable. He has nobody to talk to. He approaches random women on the street, hoping they will give him attention. He takes frequent airline trips just to have a captive audience in the seat next to him. He believes people avoid him. He becomes increasingly frustrated by his isolation. This frustration turns to anger. Bryant decides to retaliate against the world which rejects him. He goes into a local cafe with a camera, taking pictures, learning the layout. He is scoping out the location for a massacre.
While spree killers have lost the ability to control their violent impulses, their actions are often premeditated, as in Bryant's case. The planning may sometimes be days or weeks ahead of time. These are not crimes of passion or immediate impulsive reactions. This premeditation places them higher on my scale of evil.
April 28, 1996. Bryant goes on a killing spree. First, he targets family friends. He shoots a husband and wife who own a local inn. Next, he goes to the cafe, where he slaughters 20 victims. He continues in the parking lot, chasing down victims and coldly executing them. He claims 35 lives. Police surround him at the inn. Bryant torches the house, setting it ablaze. Badly burned, he is taken into custody.
Martin Bryant's crime was clearly premeditated, and that increases its degree of evil on my scale. But Bryant's low IQ and mental illness render him not fully responsible for his actions. For this reason, I place Martin Bryant at level 13A, reserved for inadequate, rageful personalities with psychopathy who are also mentally ill.
Martin Bryant is currently serving 35 life sentences in Hobart's Risdon prison after pleading guilty to murder. Since his incarceration, he has tried to kill himself several times. Like Martin Bryant, some of the most vicious murderers are characterized as spree killers. Can science help us understand what triggers their violence? Dr. Roy Baumeister at the University of Florida thinks he has an answer: social exclusion. He believes there is a clear link between the feeling of being rejected and violent aggression.
This feeling that others don't like you, that they don't want to have you around, that they don't want to be with you, this presses some buttons deep in the psyche, and certainly most people deal with it in a more constructive manner, but for some people it does lead to an outburst of violence.
To see how social exclusion can lead to violence, Dr. Baumeister assembles a group of test subjects. He asks them to briefly socialize.
You guys all psychology majors, pretty much?
Yeah.
My favorite class is got to be social psychology right now.
He then separates the group and randomly tells people whether or not the group members want to work with them.
They're put into a separate room, and then some people are told, just by random assignment, everybody picked you.
Usually what I do is look at those sheets that everyone filled out saying who they want to work with. This time what happened is everyone chose you, so that's great.
Other people are told, no one chose you, no one wanted to work with you.
This time what happened is no one chose you.
What kind of impact does this rejection have? After being accepted or rejected, all subjects are then asked to participate in a word association exercise. They are shown half-formed words and asked to fill in the blanks. Dr. Baumeister pays close attention to the nature of their choices, looking for violent undertones.
They're supposed to fill in the letters which are missing, and they could fill it out with neutral words like slob or slab, or they could fill it out with a violent word like stab. They think they're just solving a word puzzle, but there are different solutions, and you see what's sort of at the top of their mind.
The results are revealing. The students who were told they were unpopular chose to create more violent words.
Rejection gave people more angry and aggressive thoughts. When they were completing the word stems, they came up with more words pertaining to aggression than, say, the people who've been told that everybody accepted you.
To further test his social exclusion theory, these same participants then play video games against one another. The prize is an opportunity to blast the partner with a loud, painful noise through headphones.
You can set how long will it be and how loud will it be.
Results show that those who have been rejected earlier by their peers are far more likely to turn the volume louder and for a longer period of time.
Just having been told that these people didn't want to work with you, that makes people more likely to behave aggressively.
Dr. Baumeister's study might provide a clue into the psychology of spree killers and mass murderers, who typically share a history of social exclusion.
The case studies of the spree killers, I think you'll find over and over again that they feel repeatedly rejected. Often a series of rejections is what got them started on the idea of planning to carry this out.
Can exclusion and rejection motivate someone to kill? Can the pain of isolation drive someone to murder? August 1st, 1966, Austin, Texas. 25-year-old Charles Whitman has just killed his wife and mother. He packs a footlocker full of provisions: flashlights, water, a radio, and an arsenal of weapons. He drives to the University of Texas and climbs the clock tower. For 96 minutes, Charles Whitman opens fire on campus. He kills 14 and wounds 31. Lake Worth, Florida, 1940s. To outside observers, the Whitmans are a happy American family. They have a prominent standing in the community. But behind closed doors, Whitman's father is violent. He beats the family when they show weakness or failure. He uses a belt to inflict regular abuse. Charles aims to please his father by excelling in hobbies. He plays the piano and becomes an avid hunter, developing a keen interest in firearms. But the beatings and abuse continue. At 18, Whitman leaves home and enlists in the Army. At first, he is the model soldier, known for his skills on the shooting range. He is sent to the University of Texas on scholarship, where he meets and marries a local girl named Kathleen. But marriage is troubling for Whitman. He often yells at his wife and frequently feels the urge to hit her. He reprimands himself for having such aggressive, violent impulses. He types out notes, reminders to himself: don't nag, be courteous, be gentle. But Charles Whitman will soon find it difficult to control his rage. May 1966. Whitman admits to reaching a breaking point. He complains of frequent headaches. He insists that something is physically wrong with him and confesses this in his journal.
Lately, I have been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts and overwhelming violent impulses. I have been fighting my mental turmoil alone and seemingly to no avail.
Whitman sees a psychiatrist who finds him to be oozing with hostility. Whitman confesses that he would like to go up to the clock tower and kill people with a deer rifle. It is dismissed as an idle threat. July 31st. Whitman turns this fantasy into a reality. But first, he composes a suicide letter.
It was after much thought that I decided to kill my wife, Kathy. I truly do not consider this world worth living in, and am prepared to die. And I do not want to leave her to suffer alone in it. Similar reasons provoked me to take my mother's life also.
After Whitman murders his mother and his wife, he drives to the University of Texas with 7 rifles and shotguns. From atop the clock tower, he opens fire on people below. The rampage continues for almost 2 hours. 14 killed, 31 wounded. Police finally storm the tower and shoot Whitman dead. In his suicide letter, Whitman requested that an autopsy be done on him to explain his behavior. Authorities found that he had a brain tumor. It is discovered near the amygdala, the region of the brain that regulates fear and aggression. Could this tumor have played a role in Charles Whitman's killing spree? Using this information, Dr. Stone considers where to place Whitman on his scale of evil.
Rampage killers like Whitman often have an antisocial personality disorder underpinned by the desire for revenge. I must, however, take into account the physical malady of his brain tumor. This could have contributed to Whitman's loss of control over his murderous impulses, and this places him lower on my scale at a level 8, which is reserved for non-psychopathic persons with smoldering rage who kill when the rage is ignited.
Charles Whitman records his violent thoughts in his diary for years. He writes himself reminders to control his aggression, but ultimately, he is unable to contain his rage. Could his tumor have contributed to his killing spree? Or can science offer another explanation for a spree killer's lack of emotional control? Dr. Catherine Putnam, a psychologist at Boston University School of Medicine, believes that Whitman's behavior is typical of people with borderline personality disorder, a mental illness that can cause impulsive behavior and rage.
It's characterized by dysregulation or instability in identity, as well as behavior and also emotion. So impulsive behaviors that could be anything from reckless driving or gambling to self-harm or fits of rage. And we also see instances of inappropriate, intense emotion.
Dr. Putnam has developed an experiment that tests whether patients with borderline personality disorder can consciously suppress emotion. She places the subject in an fMRI machine, which produces an image of their brain. As the fMRI tracks changes in brain chemistry, she shows the subject a series of slides. On each slide are 2 images of ordinary houses and 2 images of human faces.
They're pictures of people who are expressing fear, which is threatening to an individual because it indicates there's something out there in the environment that may be hurtful or dangerous.
Dr. Putnam tells the subject to ignore the faces completely and focus entirely on determining whether the houses are the same or different. She predicts that in spite of having a task to concentrate on, the subject with borderline personality disorder will react emotionally to the faces. She watches for signs of activity in the amygdala, the region of the brain that regulates fear and aggression.
What we found was that the group with borderline personality disorder was less able to ignore those emotional stimuli. And the way we see that is we see more amygdala activity in the borderline personality group than we do in the control group.
Putnam's finding indicates that in people with borderline personality disorder, there is a fundamental inability to regulate emotion. They are more prone to accumulating stress and less able to consciously suppress rage and fear. In a few cases, this rage can lead people to horrific acts of violence. Even before their spree killings, both Charles Whitman and Martin Bryant show signs of unregulated anger. Whitman confesses in his diaries to abusing his wife. Since childhood, Martin Bryant has an uncontrollable fascination with violence and destruction. This type of mounting stress, humiliation, and anger could also be the trigger that led Charles Starkweather on one of the most terrifying spree killings in U.S. history. Lincoln, Nebraska, 1958. A teenage boy murders his girlfriend's family and then embarks on a bloody spree killing. 19-year-old Charles Starkweather terrifies the nation as he and his 14-year-old lover, Carol Fugate, embark on a deadly road trip, gunning down anyone who stands in their way. They claim 10 victims.
When Charles Starkweather decides to kill, virtually no one is safe. It seems to be an all-out attack on society itself. As with other spree killers, we see in Starkweather's history a long pattern of isolation and social rejection.
Born in 1938, Charles Starkweather's first years of life are idyllic. At home, he is happy and loved. He and his brothers spend their afternoons playing in the backyard. The trees remind Charles of an enchanted forest. The image captivates him. His problems begin on the first day of school. He is teased mercilessly by his peers. They taunt him for his bow legs and nearsightedness. He quickly becomes an outcast. The rejection spawns violent thoughts in Charles. He begins to fantasize about taking revenge on the bullies who pick on him. As a teenager, Charles develops an obsession with James Dean, an icon for rebellion. He stands in front of the mirror trying to make himself look like his idol. He feels a kinship with Dean, as if they are fellow outlaws raging private wars against the establishment. Charles drops out of school in the 9th grade. He finds work as a garbage man. Hauling away his neighbor's trash only fuels his resentment. But everything changes when Charles meets Carol Ann Fugate, a blue-eyed, rebellious 13-year-old girl. She accepts Charles the way he is. After dating a year, they are deeply in love. Though Carol is 5 years younger, Charles makes up his mind to marry her. But Carol's family stands firmly in his way. When he announces his marriage plan, Carol's stepfather throws him out, slamming the door in his face. The rejection sends Starkweather into a rage.
Of all the blows to Starkweather's ego, this, in his mind, is the worst. He faces the prospect of losing the only person who he feels ever accepted him. He becomes desperate, and the rage that has been building since childhood finally seeks an outlet.
Starkweather returns to Carol's home. This time, he is carrying a .22 caliber rifle. He shoots and kills Carol's stepfather, mother, and 2-year-old sister. Apparently unfazed by the bloody slaughter, the two lovebirds spend the next 6 days in Carol's house, watching TV and having sex. They leave a note on the door telling worried family and friends that everyone is sick with the flu. 6 days after the murder, Starkweather tells Carol to get in the car and they take off, looking for a way out of town. Hours later, Carol's family is found dead. Police swarm the scene looking for answers. They suspect Starkweather, but have no physical evidence and no leads on where he took Carol. They are unprepared for the chase ahead, a trail of dead victims, and a motive they don't understand. Nebraska, January 1958. 19-year-old Charles Starkweather is on a killing spree. With him is Carol Fugate, his 14-year-old girlfriend. Starkweather's first victims are Carol's mother, stepfather, and baby sister. He shoots them in a rage when he is denied permission to marry Carol. Next, Starkweather and Carol stop at the ranch of 70-year-old August Meyer. Retired police detective John Cameron has tracked dangerous criminals before. Like the investigators at the time, Cameron knows the key to catching Starkweather is getting inside his mind.
Starkweather decided to go out to the ranch of August Meyer. He knew August Meyer. He had hunted there in the past, and he knew that August had guns.
Starkweather came to steal the weapons from Meyer. But when the 70-year-old rancher steps on the porch, Starkweather kills him.
Starkweather got out of the car and walked up and shot Meyer immediately.
After killing Meyer, Starkweather's car gets stuck in the mud. He and Carol leave it at the ranch. They hitch a ride with unlucky passers-by. Another pair of teenage sweethearts, Bob Jensen and Carol King.
As they got in the back seat, Starkweather
stuck a gun up to the back of Bob Jensen's head and ordered him to drive.
He may have been paranoid that they knew about Carol Fugate's family being murdered, but I think Starkweather was just enjoying the power of his violence.
Starkweather orders Bob Jensen to drive back toward Meyer's ranch. He forces them into a nearby storm cellar.
And he shot Bob Jensen and Carol King in the storm cellar. Then they took Bob Jensen's car back into town.
Police find Starkweather's car parked at Meyer's ranch. They storm the house and find August Meyer's body. Nearby, they find Bob Jensen and Carole King. They fear Starkweather is hunting for his next victim.
Starkweather's murders were completely random. There was no pattern behind them, so police couldn't anticipate where he might strike next. I'm sure most of these investigators had never seen a spree killer before, and they must have felt fear and uncertainty waiting for him to strike again.
Starkweather and Carole drive to a wealthy neighborhood, looking to rob an upscale house. They enter the Ward residence.
This is the home of Mr. and Mrs. Ward, and
Starkweather took Mrs. Ward and her maid hostage all day.
later on, Mr. Ward came home, and as he entered the house, Charlie shot him. And then ended up killing Mrs. Ward and the maid, stole their car, and left.
Starkweather has claimed 9 victims. On the way out of town, he and Carole stop to have sex in the back seat. By the time police find Bob Jensen's car in the Ward's driveway, Starkweather is on the highway heading towards Wyoming. Local police put an APB out on the Ward's car and call in the National Guard for help.
News of the murders was broadcast on the radio, which he and Carole Fugate must have been listening to as they flew down the highway. They must have heard their names, and Starkweather knew he was a fugitive. They drove all night and ended up crossing state lines into Wyoming.
At dawn, Starkweather decides to throw off authorities by swapping cars a 3rd time. He notices one parked on the side of the highway. Inside is a traveling shoe salesman who Charlie kills with 9 shots. He takes the man's keys and tries starting the car. As he struggles, a police officer pulls up to investigate. Carole runs toward the deputy, claiming she is a hostage. Starkweather takes off. A high-speed chase leads to Starkweather's capture. In custody, he claims the killing spree was fun. Dr. Stone looks back on Starkweather's crimes and considers where to place him on his scale of evil.
Charles Starkweather is a psychopathic, cold-blooded spree or multiple murderer. That, coupled with Starkweather's admission to enjoying the process of taking people's lives, leads me to place him at a category 15 on my scale of evil.
At trial, Carole Fugate claims that Starkweather held her hostage throughout the killing spree. But both she and Starkweather are convicted of murder. Carole is sentenced to life in prison, but is paroled in 1976. She continues to maintain her innocence. In 1959, Charles Starkweather is executed. In July 1997, famed fashion designer Gianni Versace is shot twice and killed in front of his Miami mansion by spree killer Andrew Cunanan. Versace was his 5th victim in 3 months. The world mourned the tragic and untimely death of such a celebrated figure. Everyone asked the same question: why? Was his spree killing the result of massive rejection?
Andrew Cunanan was not a loner or an outcast. He did feel, however, that he was too special to be dismissed in any way by any one person or group. To better understand his frame of mind, I first look at the way he was raised as a child.
Born in 1969, Andrew Cunanan grows up in San Diego, California. His parents tell him that he is more special and deserving than others. He believes that someday he will become rich and famous. But after graduating from high school, Cunanan's world is shattered when his father abandons the family, leaving them in financial ruin. Openly homosexual, Cunanan dives into San Diego's gay social scene. He hides his poor, average background by creating a false identity of wealth and privilege. He cons his way into a world of money and decadence, and he sells sex to glitzy, rich men. He is known to idolize Gianni Versace's luxurious lifestyle. Cunanan's boyfriend, David Madsen, gets tired of Cunanan's deceit. He breaks off the relationship, crushing Cunanan.
Andrew Cunanan had already been abandoned once by his father. When he is rejected by the man he loves, a deep insecurity surfaces, leaving him extremely vulnerable. The feeling of rejection unleashes a pattern of ungovernable wrath.
April 29th, 1997. A man is found beaten to death in a Minneapolis loft. The loft belongs to David Madsen, Cunanan's ex, who is also found dead near a lake shore. Cunanan killed both men, suspecting they were having an affair. When police announce Cunanan is a suspect, he runs, taking no prisoners. First, he kills a man for a Lexus, which he drives to New Jersey. Dumping the Lexus, he murders another man for a truck, which he drives south to Miami, towards the home of his idol, fashion designer Gianni Versace. On July 15th, 1997, Cunanan kills Versace in cold blood.
By murdering someone rich and famous, Cunanan feels important. The act of taking this celebrity's life dampens the pain of his reality, which is that his boyfriend rejected him, his father abandoned him, and that he has not become a member of high society, which has always been his dream. Gianni Versace's life represented everything Cunanan hoped to be, but was not. By taking that life, he felt empowered.
The last time Cunanan pulls the trigger is on himself. Dr. Stone reviews Cunanan's heinous acts and places him on the scale of evil.
Andrew Cunanan was a psychopathic spree killer and acted with malice, unwilling to show mercy to any of his 5 victims. He therefore earns a place of 15 on my scale of evil. Cunanan, like many spree killers, took his own life. Investigators are, for that reason, hampered in their quest for answers because no answers can be elicited from the actual killer.
1988. Riverhead, New York. 19-year-old Yusef Rahman is a loner with a low IQ. He plays with plastic soldiers, pretending he is part of a military SWAT team. He plots out strategies and missions. But when his mother forbids him to enlist in the army, Rahman decides to wage his own war. In a deadly game of make-believe, Rahman heads out into his suburban neighborhood with loaded guns. He tells himself he is part of a SWAT team that must rid the world of drug dealers. He shoots 4 people in 1 week, killing 1.
The degree of evil in Yusef Rahman's killing spree depends on how delusional he was. Did he truly believe he was part of a secret SWAT team? Or was it merely a fantasy, something he knew wasn't real?
Many spree killers do not survive their rampage. But Yusef Rahman was captured. An interview conducted by police shortly after his arrest offers Dr. Stone a rare insight into the mind of a spree killer. Police first question Rahman about his initial attack.
I was pretending I was an army man in combat. I was intending to go find drug dealers.
All right, what were you going to do if you found them?
I'm going to shoot them.
Okay. Do you do any drugs?
No.
And The man that you shot, did you know him to be a drug dealer or anything like that?
No, I just assumed.
After his first attack, Rahman spends the next 4 nights creeping through neighbors' backyards, peering into their windows, watching them before taking aim and firing shots at their heads. He describes the experience.
And I looked at him and seen children, the man and his wife sitting down, and the man was holding his little daughter.
Did you know this man?
No, I didn't.
And when you looked into that house and you saw that man, what did you do?
Aimed at his head.
What did you think was going to happen to him when you shot it at him?
I wasn't thinking about it at the time.
Yusef Rahman shoots at 4 men. He kills 1 and injures 3. When captured, he makes a plea for forgiveness.
I'd like to say I'm truly and sincerely sorry for what I've done. I know it was wrong. I'm sorry for the family that lost their husband and their father.
Yusef Rahman has an antisocial personality disorder. His rage and his clearly malicious intent to kill for his own amusement play key factors in where I will place him on the scale of evil. He comes across as a paranoid fanatic. He does not have bizarre delusions, however, and despite his low IQ, he does know right from wrong. For these reasons, I place Yusef Rahman on my scale of evil at level 13.
In custody, Yusef Rahman admits to another murder in Missouri. For the combined crimes, he is serving a life sentence. In the last decade, spree killings have continued in America with frightening regularity. These gunmen have often been teenagers, and their victims their own classmates. The Virginia Tech spree killing was the nation's most deadly.
A gunman, his motive still unknown, has killed more than 30 people, making it the deadliest shooting in U.S. history.
April 16th, 2007, Blacksburg, Virginia. 23-year-old senior Sung-Hee Cho unleashes a bloodbath of bullets on campus. He kills 32 people, both classmates and teachers, and wounds 25 more before taking his own life. Dr. Stone examines this latest spree killer.
Sung-Hee Cho fits the stereotype of a spree killer. The warning signs are almost always there. He was isolated and had no friends. He sought revenge from a society that shunned him. Most often, these spree killers commit suicide at the end of their rampage, as did Cho. He fits the profile of spree killers since they first appeared in our society. And those that emerge in the future will no doubt have the same traits.
Spree killers. They seem to come out of nowhere. But in fact, there are signs to profile their psychology. Outcasts, loners, obsessed with weapons. Dr. Stone has identified these common personality traits. He will continue to study the dark minds of murderers, giving insight into why people kill. Insight that may one day help prevent their evil acts.